بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Thank you for bringing your heart, and it's truly my pleasure and honor to be here. And I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses all the great work that Celebrate Mercy does in bringing the hearts closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in encouraging others to embody the prophetic traits of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This topic that I'm going to be talking about today is one of great importance, especially in our times. Navigating waswasa and negative thoughts is something that many people are struggling with in our times. I see this in my clinical work. I see this also as a teacher and a mentor at the Home Institute. It's definitely increasing the struggle. And this is something that I saw early on when I started this work in navigating Islamic psychology, and actually played a big role in why I developed the heart over mind and ego method, the home method. And it is because I saw how we burden the mind, and how if you don't truly understand the tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, you will burden them. So one of the concepts in the heart over mind and ego method is you have to understand the purpose of yourself, why Allah created you, but you also have to understand the purpose of the facets and tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. Because anytime you do not use something in line with its purpose, you abuse it. And abuse is actually burdening something in a way that is not in line with its purpose. So for example, if you use a pen as a hammer, you're going to abuse the pen, right? You're using the pen in a way that it was not designed. And many people misunderstand the design and what the mind is created for and how it functions. So in my clinical work, providing therapy to Muslims over the years and non-Muslims as well, I am seeing an increase in OCD. I'm seeing an increase in generalized anxiety disorder. So waswasa comes up, the topic of waswasa and negative thoughts comes up in helping people navigate these struggles, but also in helping people navigate non-pathological struggles, like the typical anxiousness that comes with the human experience, coping with difficulties, simply people trying to navigate their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with themselves, and empowering their spiritual and emotional well-being. So today I want to share with you some key truths about waswasa, the whispering of Shaytan, that many I feel are disconnected from, but also what waswasa looks like in the spiritual and psychological experience. So first and foremost, waswasa is a universal experience. Many people think that there's a category of people who have waswasa and there's a category of people who don't have waswasa, and this is simply not true. Even the scholars of, those who specialize in ruqya and specialize in helping people navigate waswasa, they will tell you that everybody experiences waswasa. For Shaytan will stand on our path till the day we die. And this is something we have to understand. So it is a universal experience. And I've seen this in my work. I've seen this in my own personal life, right? When you're about to do any good deed, don't we all experience waswasa? It depends on the deed, right? It depends on how good you're about to give charity. There might be some hesitation. You're about to go to Umrah. You start having maybe negative thinking. So waswasa is something that we all will experience, because as long as you are walking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expect to experience the whispering of Shaitan. Now, the level of waswasa, the intensity of waswasa as a symptom varies. So there are levels to waswasa, as with any symptom or struggle, by the way. So the way that I look at any psychological or spiritual symptom is that it's on like a scale from easy to very difficult, or low intensity, very high intensity. And there's a progression, right? In our world today, we have this tendency to have a black and white approach towards symptoms. For example, a person, if they have one narcissistic symptom, that means they're a narcissist. Not true. You could have a symptom of narcissism, but not have narcissistic personality disorder. You could have a symptom of OCD and not have obsessive compulsive disorder, not actually be clinically diagnosed as OCD. You could have typical anxiousness, the typical anxiety that comes with the human experience, and not have generalized anxiety disorder, right? So things are on a level, and there's beauty in this, by the way. it empowers us to take preventative measures so our symptoms do not progress into something more. Our symptoms do not intensify. And as Muslims, we are taught to take preventative measures. The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, take care of your youth before your old age, right? Take care of your time before you become busy. There is this emphasis in our faith of taking care of our amanas, of the things that we are entrusted with. And here's the thing. We will be tested in anything that Allah gives us. Many people think there's a category of people who experience negative thoughts, there's a category of people who experience mental health issues, and then there are people who don't. Everybody struggles with their mental health at some point in their life to a certain degree, right? Certain different varying levels. Why? Because you have a mind. So if you have a mind, you have a psyche, you have psychological and spiritual facets. Expect that part of your human experience is you will be tested in those things, just as you have a physical body. Can anyone say that they went their whole life not being tested in their physical body, never getting sick, never having fatigue, never being tired? Absolutely not. You can't, because if you have a physical body, you're going to be tested in that. If you have children, Allah will test you in that. If you have wealth, Allah will test you in that. Now the test varies, right? The level varies. And so when it comes to waswasa, there is a level of waswasa that can be, that's not so intrusive, and waswasa that is intrusive. So it can vary. There's waswasa that can come and pass you by. You might not even realize it, right? A lot of people are not in tune with themselves, so they don't notice. But there is waswasa that is very intrusive. And I'm going to get into the difference between typical waswasa and OCD. And this is very important. It's very important to make this distinction. So there are some thoughts that come from Shaytan that might disturb you more than others, is essentially what I'm saying. There are the typical thoughts, the whisperings from Shaytan when he is trying to sway you to do bad or sway you away from doing good. Keep you away from, like I said, giving charity, for instance. You're about to do a good deed. You're about to forgive someone, and he comes and says, no, don't forgive. Look, remember how they hurt you, right? So there is that typical waswasa that comes. That's always going to be part of our experience, especially when we're about to do good. And then there's these intrusive thoughts that are more disturbing, where you pause and you say, whoa, where did that come from? These are the thoughts that disturb you, that catch you off guard, and the fact that they are disturbing actually means that they're not from you. And subhanAllah, this is where Islam is such a gift. When I get to work with Muslims, I have a lot of experience working with Muslims on OCD, especially within the last few years. I've seen such a rise in it. And with Muslims, I always find, subhanAllah, alhamdulillah, we have that gift of Islam and understanding that not all thoughts come from us, that thoughts can come from Shaytan. And when a thought disturbs you, it essentially means that it's not from you, especially when it catches you off guard. And people can get the most intrusive and disturbing thoughts about anything, by the way. I have seen people, the best of people, wallahi, the beautiful believers with great iman, experience the most intrusive and the most disturbing of thoughts that they could not even dare utter. People can get intrusive thoughts about Allah, about themselves, about others, and the companions themselves experience this, subhanAllah. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that, there's a hadith where the companions went to the Prophet ﷺ and they told him that they experienced thoughts that they could not dare speak of. Do you know how the Prophet ﷺ responded? He says to them, this is a sign of clear iman. This is a sign of clear belief. And I've seen this in my work, by the way. I have talked to people who have told me that their waswasa stopped when they stopped praying, for instance. There was a woman who says, I would get the most disturbing thoughts only in prayer. She said it was so disturbing that I felt like I had no choice but to leave prayer, subhanAllah. And do you know what made her come back to prayer? Is that when she stopped praying, the thoughts stopped. So she knew that Shaytan was standing for her in prayer. So she came back to prayer because of that. She realized that it was a way to get her to stop praying, subhanAllah. So waswasa again, the level will change, but it will be a struggle till the day we die. Because why? Shaitan knows how much Jannah is worth. He knows how significant the reward of Jannah is. And he told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will stand in our way, right? So, and he knows how much prayer is important. So the higher the ibadah, the more valuable the ibadah, expect that you will experience waswasa. And you also have to understand that Shaitan works harder when he sees someone guided by his or her faith. And he will stand in the way, like as I said, actually, I have the verse right here. Shaitan says so to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so since you caused me to be misguided, indeed, I will definitely sit for them, basically an ambush on your straight path. Where is he sitting? This ayah is unbelievably powerful. Where is he sitting? He is sitting on the straight path. So even Shaitan acknowledges that there's a straight path, a path that takes you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a path that is not straight, that is away from the straight path, that doesn't take you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And where is he saying and claiming that he is going to be sitting? On the straight path. And people will say this, so like, man, why is it that the more that I work on my iman, the more negative thoughts I'm having, the more I am experiencing waswasa? It's because you chose a very valuable path. Nothing worth having comes easy. And we understand this concept, by the way, in the dunya. We understand this. If you wanted to get into medical school and you're never tested, you expect actually tests, you expect struggle. Because it's worth being a doctor and arriving at that stage is something that you want to achieve. It's something worth it for you. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran to take Shaitan as our enemy. He told us this, but many of us do not take him as an enemy. When you take someone as an enemy, what do? You play a role in guarding yourself, right? But here's the thing. Working on waswasa and negative thoughts is not just spiritual work. We have to integrate the spiritual and the psychological. And this is something that I saw early on in my path to navigating Islamic psychology, is we have a tendency in our communities, in our ummah, to separate the spiritual and the psychological, where we want to just approach any problem, especially mental health problems that affect our psyche, like waswasa, problems that affect our mental and emotional well-being, like negative thinking. We want to approach it just through a spiritual lens. And we don't do this with other things. We don't do this with physical issues. Imagine if someone had a physical health problem and all you did was tell them to just giving them a solution from a spiritual perspective, telling them this is because of Shaitan, telling them to pray on it, telling them to read more Quran. And I think we go from one extreme to another. Either we just approach things spiritually, or we just approach things psychologically and neglect the spiritual. We neglect the Quran, we neglect dhikr, we neglect the prescriptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reality is that we are an ummah of balance, where we should look at things holistically and integrate both worlds. Just as we would tell somebody who has a physical health issue to pray, read Quran, strengthen their iman, but go to the doctor. Seek those who are medically trained to help you. Unfortunately, with the mental health world, it's not treated the same way. And so you have a lot of people who are not clinically trained talking about disorders like OCD and anxiety in a way just from a spiritual lens. And this causes harm, by the way. And this is why it's an amana, to make sure that the people who are teaching different topics are qualified to teach in those topics. Because it causes harm when you tell someone, for example, who has OCD, who their level of waswasa, the intensity of waswasa, the intensity of intrusive thoughts disturbs their level of functioning. It is harmful to tell them a solution just through a spiritual lens. Because we have psychological facets that we also need to learn to navigate. We also need to learn skills to approach problems like that. Just as a person who has a physical health issue needs to learn, maybe, take certain medicines. They need to learn, to interact with that problem differently, that physical problem. Maybe they need to eat different foods in addition to the spiritual work, right? And I want to say, and I forgot to say this in the beginning, this is a topic, I'm trying my best to give you guys the most important of tips, but it's really hard to do justice to this topic because it's so important, and there's so many tools. But inshallah, I'm hoping that you can take away the most important things. So through clinical training, we're able to see different manifestations of waswasa and how they differ from OCD. So OCD is just for those who, in case anyone listening is experiencing OCD or anyone has a family member, I just want to make it clear. OCD is different from the typical waswasa in the sense that it affects the level of functioning of a person, okay? It's a disorder that's characterized by reoccurring intrusive or unwanted thoughts, ideas, or obsessions. So in one's attempt, a person with OCD, in their attempt to remove an intrusive thought, a person will immediately feel driven to engage in a compulsion or a repetitive action. For example, if a person experiences intrusive thoughts surrounding contamination, they feel driven to immediately wash their hands, change their clothes, or repeat wudu, ablution several times in order to soothe themselves. So other common repetitive behaviors are like checking on things like the stove or to make sure the door is unlocked. And so it is different from typical waswas. And that's really how we characterize essentially, or we diagnose disorders, is we look at how it's impacting a person's level of functioning, right? So many people experience waswas and negative thoughts that don't affect their level of functioning to this degree, where they're checking things, where it's affecting the way they behave. It's not to that degree, but there are many people who are experiencing the struggle of OCD. And this is why I want to say it's important that if it is affecting your level of functioning, especially, and even if it's not, to seek, again, we don't want things to progress, but to seek people who are qualified to help you with this, okay? And who are clinically trained. I want to give you key tips to navigating waswasa and negative thoughts. First and foremost, and this is a key concept in my heart over mind and ego method, is do not worship your mind. I said earlier that one of the reasons I developed this method is because I saw how people burden their mind. They place this mind in a place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never asked them to treat the mind in such a way. So due to postmodernism and this, especially in the West, we emphasize a lot what is measurable, what is seen, what is rational. And we treat the heart like it's something that is frivolous. You see, I'm sure many of you have seen these cartoon skits of where the heart is all bandaged up and wounded, and the mind is superior and says to the heart, "I told you so." And actually, when I developed the home method, people had initially, when I was teaching it, they had a hard time with it because it's like, wait, the heart is this frivolous thing. Like, what do you mean lead from the heart? What do you mean put the mind in its place? This is the authority. So people are resistant to this. Why? Because we are programmed as a society to think that as long as I understand something, then it's powerful. As long as I have information, as long as I have stored up information here, that means I'm changing. So we burden the mind more than it can bear. As long as my brain comes back to me with a thought, I believe it. So we do not worship our mind. Meaning what? Meaning that this mind is designed to help us in so many ways. Don't get me wrong. This mind is powerful. It's miraculous. Nobody can study the mind and not be in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really. Until today, there are still things they have not discovered about the mind, about the brain. So it is powerful, but it's not designed to be the most sacred and greatest facet of intelligence within you. In fact, there's a reason we humble this mind in sujood. There's a reason we humble this mind in sujood, because you're not meant to know it all. You're not meant to have security with every confusion. You're not meant to have an answer to every problem. And your mind is a processor. So it collects information from what? From the world, through your senses. Every time you look at something, your mind is collecting information, processing it, organizing it. It's like a superior filing cabinet, and storing it, right? So every time you hear something, that is information. It's collecting information from the world. Again, processing it, storing it, right? Interpreting it for you, making sense of it. But it's limited. It's limited. The heart can process what is not visible, what is not stored. It has a greater intelligence. It has a greater ability to see what the physical eyes cannot see. There's a difference between basar and basira. Basar, you're able to see something with your physical eyes. Basira is you're able to have insight into things that your physical eye cannot see. So the heart's intelligence is greater than the mind's intelligence. And the thoughts of the heart can override the thoughts of the mind, regardless of their source. Meaning if they come from Shaytan, if they come from you. So the key, my brothers and sisters, in navigating waswasa and negative thoughts is to understand how to direct them. It's not about never having negative thoughts. It's not about how do I deny and resist and suppress. No, it's about how do I direct. Now you're using your energy in a more fruitful direction. Many people spend a lot of time fighting the waswasa and fighting battles that they're not going to win. Especially if you struggle with waswasa and intrusive thoughts, the key actually to help somebody who struggles with waswasa and really intrusive thoughts that overpower them is to stop fighting. It's a battle you're not going to win. You know, it's like a bully standing there. If a bully comes to you and says, you're this and this and this, and you disregard them, they have no, you show them that they have no effect on you. Most likely the bully is not gonna come back. But if the bully comes and you're impacted, you're like, what is that? What are you doing? And you just start, putting up arms. They realize that what they're doing has an impact on you. And this is how Shaytan works. The more you resist, the more you show that it has an impact, the more that he realizes he has a power over you. The key to navigate waswasa and negative thoughts is to understand that not everything that my mind comes back to me with, whether it's from Shaytan or my own self, that I have to give it power. And actually, the key muscle, what I call psycho-spiritual muscles, because just like we have physical muscles that we have to build psychological and spiritual muscles. And a key psychological and spiritual muscle is to understand I don't have to believe every thought that my mind comes back to me with, and I can just let it pass. Meaning that I can just not give it so much power, and I can engage in dhikr, and I can engage in the remembrance of Allah, and I can activate this heart that has a greater intelligence and remember the truths of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this heart comes to life with, that can override those thoughts of the mind. And this is really powerful work. Many people have not developed the muscle. In the beginning, you're like, what does that even look like? What does that even mean, right? And so through the heart over mind and ego method, what I teach people first is to understand that this mind is designed to be humbled, okay? It's not designed to be the final authority over you. It's not designed to be your Rabb. It's not your Lord, and it's not something you worship. So when thoughts come, I no longer believe every thought that my mind comes back to me with, okay? My goal is that when someone gets an intrusive thought or a disturbing thought, especially if it disturbs you, automatically you know that's not from you. So you let it pass as if you're not believing it. You have to train yourself to do this. I'm not engaging. It's a battle you won't win. You see, what happens with intrusive thoughts is you start fighting it. No, I'm not like that. Or let's say Shaytan comes to you and says something about Allah, something horrific, or something horrific about yourself, something horrific about your capacity to do harm, right? This is, many people experience intrusive thoughts like this, and may Allah bring ease to them. It's a very difficult struggle. And essentially what it's like they're a prisoner of their own mind, right? And so learning to understand that in those moments, that if you start engaging in the battle, so Shaitan comes to you with a thought that you're a horrible person, that you're capable of doing this, or you view Allah this way, or view yourself, or you view others this way in very disturbing ways. Once you engage and you start fighting that, and you start saying, no, I'm not, and you look for proof why you're not, you're losing. You lost the battle. The only way you can win this battle is if you don't engage, and you practice sitting with the fear that comes up when you don't engage. So the reason why it's a loop and why it's hard for people to leave negative thoughts is because, one, if you don't intercept it with something greater, it will spiral into something else. So this is why dhikr is important. Intercepting thoughts at its bud is very important. But also, it spirals because you're looking. Well, what happens is that when an intrusive thought comes up, a human being wants to prove that it's wrong about them, and because otherwise they feel fear. So the fear comes up and says, no, no, I have to engage and I have to prove that this is wrong, and I have to look for proof why this intrusive thought is not right, to calm themselves. So actually the way out of this is just to learn to sit with the fear. They're afraid of the fear itself. So they're afraid of the fear that comes up when they don't engage in the thought. And part of the work with helping people with intrusive thoughts is training them to sit with the fear, sit with the anxiety, and not escape. So let's say somebody is like afraid to touch something because they think that that's going to contaminate something else. For OCD clinical work, the actual therapy is immersion therapy. It's getting them to sit with the fear that comes up and getting them to touch that thing that they're afraid of. Why? Because Shaytan is painting you a picture that is harmful to you. And once you touch it, you're showing him that you're not paying attention to his fear mongering, right? So that's more like OCD, on the clinical side. But with typical waswasa, it's also, in a way, it's very similar. You're not going to show Shaitan that every thought he has power over you. Let's say you're about to give charity. You get the thought, no, 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 keep it to yourself. What's the solution? I'm going to do it. Rip the Band-Aid is what I call it. Rip the Band-Aid and do it. It's the same thing for someone. I give the same example for someone who has like OCD. You have to rip the Band-Aid and do what he's telling you is going to harm you. So you're about to do good. You get a waswasa, do it anyway. That's how you show. You say astaghfirullah and you do it anyway. You show Shaitan that your whisperings do not have power over me. You show Shaitan who you worship through your actions. But if you sit there with the fear of giving charity, guess what? That thought is going to spiral. And Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he taught us this. He says, if you don't nip the negative thought, the evil thought at its bud, when you first sense it, it affects your states and affects your behaviors. He said this hundreds and hundreds of years before cognitive behavioral psychology was even developed, which is what we utilize in helping people, in treating people with generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, many of the disorders. So the key to navigating waswasa and negative thoughts, any thought that takes you away from Allah, any thought that is negative about yourself, about others, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to train yourself to walk towards Allah in all your conditions. I don't worship this mind. I don't worship everything that it comes back to me with. Okay? So, and then I'm gonna show through my actions that truth. So how do I show that? So how do I do that? Is that I have to prove what is true through your actions, by the way. Your feelings and your thoughts don't always reflect what is true. You see how, how someone could claim something a million times, but then their actions reflect the truth? It's the same thing. You could get a million negative thoughts, so much waswasa. It is what you do that matters. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have this in a hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us this, that do you know that, which is that if you have a thought to do something bad and you don't do it, what happens? You get rewarded. Which tells us what? Your thoughts don't define you. And they don't define, your thoughts don't define you in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He does not judge you for the thoughts that enter and go. He judges you for how you act and what you do. So you get a negative thought. Let's say you get a negative thought about somebody, you become, maybe you get this thought of jealousy towards someone, but then you say, Allahumma barik for this person. Oh Allah, please put barakah in whatever you're jealous that this person has. And then you're making dua for this person. So what are you doing? And this thought could be from Shaitan, right? It could be from, a part of it could be from your own psychology, things that happened in the past, could be from Shaitan. It's all integrated in there, right? But it doesn't matter. You are saying, okay, that is a thought, but you know what? I'm going to act not in accordance with that thought. I'm going to elevate myself and act in accordance with what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you say astaghfirullah and you pray for that person. How powerful do you think Shaytan's going to be over you when you do that? It didn't work. They didn't give in to the thought. They didn't start engaging in a mental battle that they can't win. They didn't use this energy to stay in their mind. They said, how do I show up through my actions? They got the formula. And it's a muscle. It's something you have to constantly work on. It doesn't come overnight, I know we're on a time, so I'm going to get to how do we activate the heart? How do we activate the intelligence of the heart so it could override the thoughts, the negative thoughts that we have? Ground yourself in Allah's truths. This is how you strengthen the heart. His truths will override the illusions of Shaytan. Allah's truths will always override the illusions of Shaytan. You need an anchoring in the Quran. And this is why, it's so important that even if you're healing certain disorders, even if you're healing waswasa and you're doing the psychological work, you should have a regimen of Quran. I cannot begin to tell you how the Quran with the treatment, it does wonders. I have met people who told me that who were actually diagnosed with OCD clinically, who had severe symptoms of OCD. They did treatment, but they said that they also had a daily regimen of Quran, and they said it alleviated the symptoms so much. So they had treatment before without the Quran, they have treatment with the Quran, and it alleviates. It has just, of course, it's the words of Allah. It is shifa'un wa rahmatun lil mu'mineen, right? It is a healing and a mercy to the believers. You cannot heal without Allah. You cannot navigate this mind without Allah. You cannot navigate your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors in fruitful directions without Allah. He is the one who aligns you. He is ash-shafi. He is the healer, and if you think that you're going to heal anything or navigate anything without him, you have made the first crucial and fundamental mistake. You cannot depend on this, And so the second thing is, humble it in sujood. I mentioned earlier, and this is actually what was one of the key signs that solidified the heart over mind and ego method for me, was sujood. I was one day reflecting on sujood, and just the position of sujood, and right there in sujood, I saw the reflection of heart over mind. In sujood, as you humble your mind, what is higher? It is your heart. Your heart is not on the floor. It is your mind, and not just any part of your mind. It is the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is associated with many disorders, but it's also very fascinating, subhanAllah. It's a gift from Allah. It is the most advanced part of the brain. It is the part of the brain that differentiates us from animals. It's the part of the brain that allows us to engage in high abstract thinking, high executive functioning, the planning, the decision-making, all the things that help us function on a high level, but also is a means to anxiety and difficult psychological struggles if you don't put it in its place. It is not a coincidence, my brothers and sisters, that at the end of every rak'ah, you humble this mind. You put this mind to the floor and you remember that the heart is higher. And you remember that you have this sacred tool within you that you're meant to lead from. This sacred tool that, if connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes the home for the most valuable treasures, the most valuable guiding truths. It becomes an inner compass that guides you to what is haqq, not what is batil. Shaitan always wants you to connect to what is batil. So you're disconnected from what is a reality, from what is true. Don't let your thoughts and your inner experiences be the defining factor of what Allah has in store for you or how Allah is judging you. People do this a lot, right? They have a negative feeling. Let's say they prayed and they didn't feel any differently, or they have a negative feeling. I've heard people say that this means my prayer was not accepted. What does that mean? What are they essentially saying? They're essentially saying that Allah functions according to their feelings. They're essentially saying that the action, the very sacred and noble action of prayer, is not accepted because you didn't feel a certain way. So we need to be careful of what we are worshiping. 2 more points and I'll start wrapping up. Expect waswasa like you expect trials. Okay? Expect waswasa like you expect trials. We have the example of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, who on his very deathbed, he was going in and out of states of unconsciousness. And his son was sitting next to him witnessing this. And as he was going out in and out of states of unconsciousness, he kept saying, not yet, not yet, not yet. And his son got worried. Is my father not ready to meet Allah? He got worried about his father's state. When Imam Ahmad came back to consciousness, his son asked him, what happened? Right? And he said, I saw Shaytan telling me you have gotten out of my grip. Meaning, like, I lost you. I lost, the ability to basically lead you astray. And even then, on his deathbed, in his last moments, Imam Ahmad, rahimullah, is telling Shaytan, not yet, you have not lost me yet. Meaning what? Until my very last breath, he understood that Shaytan will stand on his way. And many of us don't treat our path like this. We ignore the truths that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Quran, that Shaytan will stand in our way. I want to end with this, that the more you build the muscle of intercepting your negative thoughts and your waswasa right when you recognize them, the less they have power over you. So train yourself that you get a negative thought, could be about anything, could be about somebody else, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about your future, about Allah himself, that maybe you're angry at Allah, or you get a thought that like Allah's out to punish you. You get a thought that Allah has abandoned you. You get a thought that Allah's not going to answer your dua as you're making dua. Immediately, don't let it go without saying astaghfirullah. Don't let it go without replacing it with a better thought. This is how you train your mind to be a servant of the heart. So this is a key concept as well, is that in the home method, is that the mind is the servant of the heart. The heart does not serve the mind. The mind serves the heart. So you get a thought. How does this thought serve the mind? So serve my heart. It doesn't serve it. So let me change it into a thought that serves the heart, that resonate with the heart's truths. So no, you remember Allah's names. You do dhikr. You make dua, Ya Allah, guide my thoughts. One of the du'as I love to make is, Ya Allah, align me spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically with what is pleasing to you, right? And every time you're in sujood, especially if you struggle with waswasa and negative, high level of waswasa, negative thinking, every time you're in sujood, remember that I'm humbling this mind. And you're training yourself to change your perception of this mind, that it's not the final authority of who I am. It's not the final authority of what Allah has in store for me. And always focus on, how do I act? What is my action, right? So you have a negative thought not to do good, do good. You have a negative thought that you are a horrible person. No. Alhamdulillah, Allah, make me better. Turn it into dua. Go do a good deed. Focus on what is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Focus on chasing Jannah. Increase in Quran. We need the Quran. Whether you don't wait until you struggle with the disorder to incorporate the Quran. Every day we should have a regimen of Quran. Every day, because here's the thing. If Allah's words are not if you are disconnected from Allah's words, then the words of society, your own unhealthy words and narratives, the words of Shaytan, the whispers of Shaytan, will become the powerful force within you. But if Allah's words are what you are anchored in and you are connected to on a daily basis, you will have this powerful force of Allah's words overriding the words of Shaytan, the words of the people, your own unhealthy words and narratives, your own unhealthy thoughts. So you have to anchor this heart in Allah's words so that when you struggle with negative thoughts, they're easily accessible as you let this mind serve the heart and you access the truths the heart contains. But if you're not giving the heart the prescriptions that it was designed to connect to, you're abusing it, because it was designed to worship Allah. And it was designed to be a home for Allah's truths in this world, so that it becomes this amazing compass, helping guide you through this path, through your path in this world. So please do the psychological work, but not just the spiritual, okay? Please, if you struggle with OCD, make sure you get your information. Make sure that you seek out people who are clinically trained to help you with. And remember that Allah can test someone in anything. And if you're being tested in your your thought patterns, if you're being tested with disorders like anxiety and OCD, just remember this. Allah tests people physical health issues. Allah can test people in mental health issues. The key is, am I worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and am I seeking the help? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, seek out that which benefits you. Okay, so Allah loves those who are empowered and help themselves. Do not just be like, I'm just going to do the spiritual and neglect the psychological work. No, there's a science to these things. There's a science to how your thoughts to your thoughts, and how to like I said, we have a treatment protocol that's helped so many people when it comes to OCD, right, and generalized anxiety disorder. So remember to do the work. I'll end with this concept in my heart over mind and ego method, which is about walking towards Allah in all conditions. If you worship your mind, or if you lead from your mind, you're only going to walk towards Allah as long as you comprehend Him, as long as you understand everything. 1 + 1 = 2, I walk towards Allah. I understand why things are happening to me, I walk towards Allah. I comprehend everything in the Quran and Allah's truths and every hadith, I walk towards Allah. I don't comprehend, I stop walking. This is what happens to people who worship their mind and lead from the mind. If you lead from your emotions, if you lead from your nafs, you're going to only walk towards Allah as long as you feel good. You don't feel good, you stop. But if you lead from the heart and you focus on taking care of this heart, making it a home for Allah's truths in this world, anchoring it in the Quran, connecting it to the prescriptions that it was designed to connect to, if you lead from the sacred space, the sacred tool, you will walk towards Allah in all your conditions. I understand, I don't understand, I walk towards Allah. I feel good, I don't feel good, I'm walking towards Allah in all my conditions. I have a negative thought, I have a positive thought, I'm making Allah the destination. I'm walking towards Allah. I have negative feelings, I have positive feelings. The destination is the same. I'm walking towards Allah. But this is a muscle you have to build, a psychological and spiritual muscle, but it works and it gets built and it gets strengthened. And this heart, again, helps you navigate your path much more easier in this world. I want to end by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to protect us from Shaytan and to align us mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually with what is pleasing to Him, and help us navigate our thoughts and the waswasa in the most beautiful of directions, and protect us from Shaytan, his whisperings, and his attempts to get us off the straight path. I'll stop here and take questions, inshallah. And forgive me for going over time. As I said, this concept I could go, it's just has so much, and I'm trying to cover it from different angles, because I know that somebody could be listening and could just have typical waswasa, right, and negative thoughts, and then somebody else could be listening and they could be actually struggling with OCD. So I just, I hope that it has helped either person who has attended, inshallah.
Subhanallah. We do have a few questions, and I will get to them in just a couple of moments, inshallah. But
Sure.
Subhanallah, Dr. Marwa, I'm going through like a perspective shift right now. Subhanallah. And as I say this a lot in the programs, and when I meet, teachers, and when I listen to something, there's always this anger that I start out with. I'm like, oh, why didn't I know this before? Right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Subhanallah. But then, of course, it's followed immediately by gratitude that we are here together as a community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to equip us. He wants to make sure we have these tools, right? To lead a life of excellence, inshallah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. My notes, I don't even know what to.
Can I say something to actually just what you just said right there is actually such a powerful thing to say, because that is actually one of the ways in which we lead from the mind is, oh, I wish I knew this before. I wish I knew this before. A lot of people do this, not just you. This is actually something that I address in teaching the method, is because a lot of times we think, because we lead from this, we think that like I should have this information, right? It should be stored up here. But actually, the heart then to lead from the heart is to say what? If it was beneficial for me to know this before, Allah would have unveiled me from it. And Allah chooses the time and place to unveil my heart from what I need to know. And perhaps had He unveiled me from knowing this earlier, I would not have been ready to receive it. This is a perfect, I'm glad you actually shared that, because it allows me to give another example of how we can shift from leading from the mind and then going into leading from the heart.